I just want to get a quick intro about you, man. Like, what have you been doing up to, now, and how did you, join GitLab? Like, what was the journey leading up to GitLab? I mean,
Hey Abhishek, and hi everyone who's joined this Q&A. And I'm glad you could take out some time and be part of this. And I hope you're all staying safe as well. So regarding me, I've been working as a senior front-end engineer at GitLab for past over 4.5 years now. I joined GitLab in late 2016. Before that, I used to work for a company called Saba Software. It is based out of San Francisco, but they had offices in India, in Mumbai and Pune. So I lived a brief amount of period of my early years of career in Mumbai, and then I moved to Pune. And I've been living in Pune for past 8 years now. And GitLab is obviously my first remote job. Before that, I was just like most of other people who would be commuting to their office and working there in a more traditional office-esque environment. So for me, GitLab was first remote opportunity. Regarding how I landed the job at GitLab, so it's a bit of an interesting story. So at Saba, we used to have a version control system, which was a centralized version control system. It was called AccuRev. Not sure if many of you have heard of AccuRev. It is a very enterprisey tool. It is not something that modern startups would be using. So we were using that version control system, and it was a huge pain for the entire team that every day at the end of our day, when we are trying to push our code, we would have to wait for the server to be available properly so that we can push our changes. And since it was a centralized server, we were required to use their desktop application, which was written in Java of all things. And the desktop application would basically map to your repository locally. You would have to push your changes, and once it gets uploaded to the server, then other team members can have access to it. So it was a very ancient system, so to say. So I was in communication with my manager regarding this problem. I told him that we need to come up with a better thing, and I've used Git. Maybe we should have rest of the team try Git at least and see whether they like it or not, whether their productivity improves or not. We can still continue using our official version control system at the company. Just that instead of all team members using it, we would only one of the team member would make sure that the code gets synchronized with the main version control system, while the rest of the team gets on with using it. So he agreed. We had a spare Linux system available in our company, and I was looking for a solution which I can probably install locally and then have it available for the team. And that's how I found out about GitLab, and I got it installed, got it working for a week or so, and the team members liked it. And I was already like 3 years into my current role, so I was already looking for opportunities. I was trying to find something, and a few of my friends were already working remotely by then. So I was kind of into the idea. I wanted to work remotely, and I was looking for a place where I can work on the kind of stuff I want to. And GitLab. So one day I received a mail as a newsletter, which had job position open. And I decided, okay, I'm gonna apply. I've already used that product. I like the product. So let's try how it goes. So I applied, and the entire recruitment process took a month or two, and then yeah, I basically got it in. So yeah, that's how I got a job at GitLab. One thing that I think worked in my favor was that I had a lot of open source contribution already available out there. So when I posted my job application there, I had all the relevant links, all the repositories and everything to show them, and that kind of helped. And I think that is true for any remote job that you are trying, because they are not going to learn that how good of a developer you are. You would basically need something to show them that they can evaluate and see this is how your work is. And for in my case, it was all the open source contribution that I did, and it worked in my favor. And yeah, so that was my journey leading up to it.
I'm on mute. Yeah, that's very interesting. Like life before GitHub or GitLab. Like I like before Git, I cannot even visualize how difficult that would be. So it's very, interesting that you were in a space where CVS was the way how you used to version code and stuff. Yeah, man, that's pretty interesting. So I will, have another question that maybe I like to, ask you, which is this thing about, like, in 2014, right? Like, when did you join GitLab? In
I
2000,
joined in late 2016.
late 2016, right?
Yeah.
So at that particular moment of time, like, were there any doubts about having a remote job when, people, I'm not sure, like, what was, like, how did you go about figuring, like, out that this was actually a great, move career wise? Because up till then, I think 2016, we were just, like, very, very early in this whole remote working space. I'm not sure, like, how many employees GitLab had then. Like right now they have 1100, but at that moment of time, how many employees were there? How did you figure that?
Yeah, so GitLab was founded in 2014, and it was started out as a side project of one of our co-founders who is based out of Ukraine. And for him, it was a casual side project. He wanted to have a self-hosted Git solution that was not GitHub. And back then, there weren't many self-hosted Git solutions out there. Like GitHub Enterprise existed, but they weren't allowing on-premise installations. So that's how our co-founder came up with the idea of creating something. And so back in 2016, I think remote scene was not as popular as it is now. I think pandemic basically kickstarted the whole remote movement. But before pandemic, it was still a niche category of companies to work for. And in my case, most of my friends were already working remotely for more than 2 years back in 2016. So I kind of had a hang of it, like how a remote job would work. What I wanted to avoid while I was looking out for remote positions was that I didn't want to work for a company where I'm basically hired as a contractor for some other firm, where the main hiring organization is sort of an intermediator. I wouldn't want to name names, but there are companies like that out there where you are part of that company as an employee, but you would eventually get hired as a contractor for some other firm, and your payment is basically managed by that intermediator. I didn't want to go that route. uh, Prior to GitLab, I worked for Saba. It is an enterprise learning management system company, and it was an enterprise product, but it was again a product-based company. So my goal was clear. I wanted a product-based remote job where I'll not be working on an hourly based contractor. I wanted to work full time on a product that I believe in. If it works out, fine. I'm in no rush that I need to just switch in any way. And like things align pretty well. Like GitLab was just 2 years into setting up as a company. Like in 2014, the company was co-founded. They Before that they were part of Y Combinator, where they incubated, and then they basically started out. And then when I joined, they had already 80 plus team members, and I think year 2016 itself was the year where a lot of hirings were made. And to date, like more than 80-85% of team members that we have at GitLab were part of the year 2016. So like we have those OG team members are still part of the organization. And
Nice.
obviously, like the headcount that we have now, which is close to 1200, this headcount was achieved in just past 2 years. So we have gradually hired people over time, but in last 2 years, that is 2019 and 20, we've hired a lot of team members. And it becomes apparent when you attend the summits. So like GitLab has this or had this before pandemic hit us. We had this annual conference or a biannual conference where we would have a conference somewhere in the world at the interval of 9 months. So the last conference that we all attended was back in 2019. It was in New Orleans. Before that, it was in South Africa, Cape Town. And before that, it was in Greece. And even before that, it was in Mexico. So you can imagine, like the conference happened in pretty much every continent. And the first conference that I attended was in Mexico. And from that onwards, I attended the 4 conferences so far. I didn't miss any. We had one last year. It was in March, and obviously we know how it went. So So far, we are all waiting for pandemic to be over so that we can be together. But the last four conferences that we have met, we noticed like how so many new faces we got to see in every conference that we attended. So it kind of reflected the hiring pace that we had. And at the same time, we don't feel the friction. Obviously, like when a lot of people join your company, there is obviously a slight cultural change. But
Yeah.
thankfully at GitLab, when we hire someone, we look for values fit instead of cultural fit. And our values are all transparency, and all of it is part of GitLab's handbook. So like all those details are available publicly. Anyone can look at the process, like how GitLab hiring works, how day-to-day job at GitLab works, what the product is like, pretty much. And in fact, entire source code of GitLab is licensed under MIT, except for the enterprise edition part. And enterprise edition part is again available to view. So you can literally look at the code even for a paid tier of GitLab. So that's kind of the transparency that we live with. And it basically became much easier to decide, okay, I want to work for this company. So yeah, I didn't have as much concerns of working remotely. The concerns that I had was obviously like I didn't want to get into that hourly tracking stuff, etc.
Yeah. That's great, man. So now let's, like shift gears a little bit. So now we'll, start taking up questions. I can see three questions posted right now. So maybe, as a follow-up question, like keeping the flow going of talking about the culture or the values at GitLab. Let us take Karthik's question first. And I know the answer to it, but let's hear. Like he's wondering like what the remote culture is like. So is it very hands off, or is it like micromanaged? And do you track your time, or is it very flexible?
So I would say it is fairly autonomous. We do not micromanage. It isn't like my manager would be assigning me the work that I need to do for the next week or so. It is fairly autonomous. Think of it like you are working on an open source project, but it is your full-time job to work on that project. And when I joined GitLab, we didn't have functional departments. It was a fairly early startup stage kind of work culture where we had a single front-end team, we had a single back-end team, single database team. So that meant that any product area, if it involves front-end change, anyone from the front end would be able to pick it up. It was fairly autonomous. It isn't like you cannot touch this part of code base because you haven't worked on it or you are too new to the company. So it wasn't like that. If you find an issue that you think it is working on, it is worth working on, you just start working on it. It isn't like your manager, you need to take manager's approval or a permission before starting work on it. And we do not do any kind of micromanagement as well. There is no hourly tracking. It is fine if you are able to be productive only for a couple of hours during the day. You are not expected to be available online at a given point of time in your day, and it wouldn't work as well, right? Because the entire company is spread across 69 countries now, and you cannot just imagine someone to be available all the time because work constantly happens in all the time zones. So you are not expected to be available in a certain time zone which is not your time zone. So in my case, I would start my day around 10:30 or 11 at times, and I would end it by 7:30, 7 p.m. in the evening, provided that there aren't any calls. At the same time, like GitLab, within GitLab, we don't have too many meetings. We would so if I give my personal example, I have two meetings throughout my week that I attend. One is my one-on-one with the manager. We have weekly one-on-ones with manager. It is a half an hour call where we discuss like what I've been working on, how the things are. It can include non-work related stuff as well. Like last one-on-one when I had it with my manager, I was discussing PS4 games. So it isn't like you strictly stick to work related discussions. It is a fairly casual meeting where you discuss anything, be it your work or not. And it happens on weekly basis. So it isn't like you will be too out of touch with the actual state of things with your work. You will be able to see your manager every week and discuss things with him. Apart from that, I have one team meeting. So that is pretty much the entire meeting schedule for my week. These are the two meetings that I attend. All the other meetings are optional. In fact, team meetings are also optional. We have everything recorded and uploaded on YouTube in GitLab's unfiltered channel. So you can actually take a look at, so I work in a plant department within GitLab. So we have different DevOps stages as a entire DevOps lifecycle, and plan is one of the stage, and I am part of the plan team. So within plan team, we have weekly team calls, and we discuss the product roadmap for the plan division within GitLab. And all of it gets recorded and gets uploaded onto the YouTube, unless we discuss something which is like confidential information, specifically around customer issues. So that's something that we do not upload, but otherwise, all weekly calls get uploaded. So anyone can look at how we do meetings, and they can basically look at the future roadmap of the product. So yeah.
Yeah, transparency is like pretty big. Like I'm amazed at the, like the quality of, sharing that goes on in GitLab. Like they've essentially like opened up the whole, like if somebody, like I knew that, like if somebody, like if one day I had to run a remote organization, like GitLab playbook would, come in very, very, handy. So moving on to, another question, and I'm assuming this is from Raj Das. It is, he's mentioned it as anonymous, but so what is the interview process in GitLab right now? And have, have you seen things change a bit since your
So
time? Like,
yeah. So obviously, like the type of process that I went through while getting hired at GitLab is drastically different from what we have now. I'm part of the recruitment process as well. Like we have the initial filter, like based on resumes and then the job work experience, etc. And after that, we do the first call usually happens with the people ops team, where they see if the person is values fit or not, why they want to work at GitLab, etc. So unlike most of the companies where technical interviews happen early on, we do an HR interview as the first interview, and then technical interviews happen. And I often take technical interviews as well. But like regarding the detailed process, so I would highly encourage someone to anyone who's looking to see like how the interview process is like, to look at our handbook. It has everything detailed, and our handbook is the most frequently updated document there. And it has obviously a lot of content across different sections of the workings of the company. But at the same time, you can look at deep down details, like what would happen the moment they click on that apply button after providing all the details for a job position. So yeah, I would, it wouldn't be fair to go through the entire recruitment process, but yeah, I would highly encourage that. And yeah, one thing to note here is that we don't do typical whiteboard interviews, regardless of which engineering position you are applying on. We wouldn't ask you to basically reverse a doubly linked list, etc. So instead we would ask you real world problems, and more often we would basically ask you to work on one of the existing issues within GitLab, because that's what you are going to do in case you get hired. So why not try your
yeah,
hands on working with GitLab in the interview process itself?
nice. Cool. I hope, Raj, that answers your question. And feel free to, like just want to let everyone know that we have, limitations on time bit. So if, some of your questions are not, covered in today's session, we can always take them up, or we can, get more details in the Slack group also. So I'll try to, fit in as many as possible. So moving on, I want to take up Dhrubesh's question about how has the tech stack evolved at GitLab since 2016? Like, has it remained the same, or have you seen a lot of changes in that
Yeah,
sense?
so I'll answer both the backend stack as well as front end stack. Uh, so at GitLab, regarding the front end stack, so when I joined, we didn't have a formal front end framework, so to speak. We were using, so the entire GitLab is still a Ruby on Rails application, so to speak, with some of the parts written in different languages and different frameworks, depending on how critical that portion is. But largely it is a Ruby on Rails application. And that means that the front end was Haml, and some of the other parts were written in jQuery. This is from 2016. But then in late 2016, we started slowly migrating towards Vue.js. And right now, front end is largely Vue.js, unless it is a front end app where we do not need any form of user interaction, and the data that we are showing is largely static. So that's where we have plain HAML server-side rendered pages. Regarding backend, so GitLab has a lot of moving parts. One of the core portion of GitLab's backend is GitLab CI, and most of the people who use GitLab come here for GitLab CI. And the CI is the core component of GitLab CI is GitLab Runner, and Runner is written in Go because it needs to run your CI pipelines in a bare metal or essentially in a cloud VM. So that is not written in Ruby, it is written in Go, and it is tied together into the GitLab. So that portion is entirely Go. We have some portions written in plain C as well, especially the Gitly parts. So I'm going to go a bit technical here just to quickly summarize. So what happens? So in a typical Git repository, what happens is you would check out your repository locally. You would do some changes. You would push those changes into a remote repository. So in case of GitLab, once your repository changes are pushed over to GitLab, what happens then? So we do not do Git operations right away into the cloud where gitlab.com is hosted. Instead, we have something called Gitly, which is basically wrapping around the entire Git operations. And Gitly is written in C and some portions in Go, with the front end or the middle layer, or rather the API layer, written in Ruby. So Gitly would basically do the Git operations, and then eventually the operations get reflected into the actual Git repo, which gets stored in the storage server. But yeah, to again come back to the original question, like how the tech stack has evolved, I think it has stayed largely the same. I would say that it is 85% same. We haven't added new things or removed obsolete things, except for, as I said, like we have removed a lot of jQuery as far as front end is concerned. We have upgraded our Rails and Postgres databases to a newer version, but we haven't replaced like some of the core parts into an entirely different implementation. Those have remained as it is.
Yeah, that's quite, good to hear, because like sometimes we hear about these massive rewrites happening in a lot of companies. Like every 2 years a new framework comes about, there's a, like a new fad. And essentially I would assume this is like a sign of like maturity, or maybe like how the founders think about this, that essentially they want to make sure that things are as, stable as possible, and people are not, like suddenly, like they are asked to learn a new language, or things like that. Is that like a value of sorts? Like is that a value, specific value? I just want to maybe quickly dig deep into this.
So regarding the development workflow, whenever we work on a new feature or a new product area, our goal is eventually to make sure that we live by our values while working on something. And one of the core values that we have is boring solutions. What that means is that when you're working on a feature, if you think that the first iteration of this feature, or MVC as we speak, if the MVC of the particular feature is getting complicated, we would cut down the scope. It isn't like we need to ship it anyway because we have committed to some customers. And that's not how any product company would operate, right? A product company would, again, like we have paying customers, so we need to make sure that our needs of our customers are also met. But at the same time, we do not want to enter into a business of customization where we would tailor GitLab to a specific customer just because they offered a lot of money. So what we do is that we take an approach where our product feature is generalized to accommodate a lot of needs of different customers. And at the same time, we break down our entire effort into multiple releases so that we don't end up building something complicated as an MVC, such that maintenance of that feature becomes difficult. And to do that, we basically follow boring solution as an approach there. And that's what we do while reviewing the smallest merge requests as well. So like my role at GitLab is not limited to just writing front end for client team. I also review a lot of community contributions. I am front end maintainer of GitLab project, and part of that job is to review a lot of merge requests that include front end changes. And that means that the changes might be coming not only from team members, but also from community contributors who are independent developers, just like anyone else. And if we look at the changes there and we see that these are fairly complex changes for the feature that they are trying to achieve or the problem that they are trying to solve, we would ask them to break down the entire implementation into smaller bits so that it is understandable, maintainable. And if it is getting too complex, why do it in first place? It maybe it's time to think of an entirely different approach to the problem. So,
Yeah. Cool, man. So I just want to maybe quickly mention that like now we have a good amount of questions in the pipeline. So we'll have to speed up things a bit and just make sure that at least we cover 80% of the questions that are coming in. So let's start from the top, wherein Shardul here wants to know whether product managers are technical. Like, are there product manager roles available in GitLab, and do they have to take architectural decisions? Any thoughts, any ideas on?
yes. So we do have product managers at GitLab. Like the plant team that I'm part of, we do have two product managers. So because there are different moving parts within plant team as well. So we would have a person responsible to manage that as a product. At the same time, product managers do have technical insight, but it wouldn't mean like they would arm twist you to an implementation that you do not like as a developer. That's not how it happens. Ultimately, you are in charge of implementing something. If something comes up from the product manager, like this is the feature that we work on, we discuss the entire process at length in our team meetings. Again, we try to encourage all the discussions to be asynchronous as much as possible, which means that they do not need to happen within team meeting itself. If we are working on a larger feature, we would create an issue or an epic for that feature. All the discussions, initial ideas from product managers would be posted there. Then rest of the stakeholders would start responding there. Like the first line of implementation would happen at the UX level, because if it is a feature which has some visual change in place, then that would mean that UX would need to work with product manager to come up with a design that is acceptable and is in line with our goals. So UX discussion happens there, and then developers get involved in that discussion as well. They would look at the implementation effort. They would mention like whether they need to cut down the scope from the product perspective or not, whether the implementation is doable in our boring solutions value or not. If they are not, we would cut down the scope. It isn't like you would have to implement it no matter how, because that messes the product. And being an open source project, it is highly critical that our source code is in the best shape possible at all times. So we would basically have a fair amount of say in how implementation happens. And like I said, it is great that our product managers have technical background so that we can convey our problems while implementing something, and they would understand it. They would come up with an alternative solution or cut down the scope without us having to try really hard and not being able to convince them. So
Yeah. Awesome. So to the next question, with great power comes great responsibility. So the vicious question kind of hints at that, like what happens if you're like if you feel stuck and you need help, like how do you go about that at GitLab?
yeah. So again, a lot of communication happens on Slack as well as within issues as well. So like if something is time critical where you're working on something and you realize that this is causing problem to you while working out a solution to it, you would basically ask in the front end channel. If you are a front end engineer, you would ask there, and someone or the other would respond there. And if you think that a response there is not enough, people would be happy to get on call with you, do a pairing session, and would be able to help you in debugging a given problem. So it isn't like you would be in a black box, won't be able to communicate anything if you are facing a problem. And especially if you are a new team member, chances are that you wouldn't be aware of all the areas within the code base. Like after working for 4 years, I'm still discovering some of the parts of the code base that I didn't work on before. So that may not be the case for someone who has just joined. And for them, we try to make transition as smooth as possible. People who have most exposure with the code base would respond there like, this is the area that you need to look at in case you want to do a thing A. So in that way, the entire team is fairly helpful to each other.
Yeah, cool. So before we take the next question, I just want to remind everyone that you can also upvote other people's questions as well. So like if you can just, go through the list, and if you feel some of those questions resonate with you, just give them a thumbs up, and that will help us to make sure that we get a bit of, like more time to the questions that are more valuable for the audience here. So Ayush's question is about like how would new, like fresh graduates looking for remote work opportunities go about it? Like any advice to your 23-year-old self? If I don't know what's the number, but somebody who is, like younger than
Yeah.
what we are, for sure.
Yeah. So I would encourage that contribute to open source code as much as possible. Uh, your work will speak for itself. Chances are that you wouldn't even need to apply in a company formally if you are a fairly known contributor. And again, you have to start small. It isn't like you go to a giant project on GitHub or any other place and try to find the most complex issue to work on and end up writing hundreds of lines of code as your proposal of implementation, and then it gets accepted, if at all it gets accepted. So that's not the goal you should aim for. Start small, but obviously it doesn't mean that you just do documentation updates and abuse the Oktoberfest like GitHub Oktoberfest ad. But yeah, at the same time, try to do meaningful small contributions, because as the size of project goes, like speaking of GitLab itself, we have ton of issues where the change is so trivial that we wouldn't even find it worth it to take out a portion of our time, create a merge request and solve that. So what we do is that we triage them and categorize them as something where we are accepting community contributions, and people would open up merge requests and contribute those changes. And like last month, we had a hackathon where we received over 1,500 merge requests from different community contributors. We had some contributors who went out there of their way and gave out like close to 200 merge requests. And it wasn't
Wow.
like all of their merge requests had a lot of changes. It was a small CSS class update, but those changes were required to be touched on multiple files. So this particular community contributor came up with a different, smaller merge request where he added all those missing CSS classes because we were transitioning to a different design system. And if we as a team member wanted to do it, it would meant that we would have to allocate our time in doing this trivial change instead of working on a core feature that we are working on. But it was great for that contributor to do that instead of us, and it allowed us to work closely with that contributor, and it basically increases chances of such a contributor to get hired if they are looking for a position, because we already know that they have done a lot of meaningful contributions. So for undergraduates, my only advice is do as much open source contribution as you can, build up a portfolio, have it out there to speak for you, and chances are that you wouldn't even need to apply formally. Like if you are a frequent contributor, the organization to which you are contributing to would already know that you are a well-known contributor, and they would reach out to you in case you are looking for a job.
Yeah. And maybe just to, add a little bit to what Kushal had, and this is a little counterintuitive thought, but you could also, look at the idea of earning your stripes. So with Kushal, I would imagine like working at Sabha for 3 to 4 years, if I don't remember it, but having spent that time in an organization which doesn't sound as exciting as a name, like GitLab. It's also important, like having that base allows you to dream bigger.
Yes.
So don't be disappointed if you're not able to, like within the first 1 or 2 years of passing out of college, you're not able to get into like a dream remote company. So that's something which I just wanted to put in as a disclaimer of sorts, because
Yeah.
a lot of people might just have the wrong set of expectations.
And to expand on that, like I worked at Saba, and although it wasn't a huge like a popular company among nerds, but at the same time, the skills that I learned there, I wouldn't have learned at GitLab in my early years. So just to give an example, like at Saba, all the customers that we had a ton of data to work with. So the ability to work on scale was something that I only learned at Saba, where I would be dealing with huge amount of data sets that I wouldn't otherwise if I were working at GitLab. So that was my learning there. So it doesn't really matter what your first job is, as long as you are learning something that you wouldn't
Yeah.
learn otherwise. It is important to take those learnings as a positive side of that particular job position, and then use that to promote yourself further.
Cool. So we'll move on to Komal's question, which is, I would assume it's definitely something which is just on people's mind. Could you talk a little bit about compensation? And it doesn't need to be like, it could be relative numbers as well. So
Yeah.
it doesn't.
It basically is a mixture when you look at all the remote companies as a whole across the globe. Like some companies would basically give you salaries which is equivalent to someone hired in US. Some companies would do local market rates. And in case of GitLab, it largely depends on your skill set as well as where you are located. And at the same time, it really depends on how good you are for a job that you are doing. Although GitLab does market rate as a salary, it is a public knowledge. But at the same time, we make sure that the person doesn't feel like they are missing out on something. Because it isn't just the salary that we are offering. We are giving an entire culture. And just to like put it into perspective, if I look out for a remote position as an alternative, if I were to leave GitLab and join somewhere else, I'm sure that I'll be able to make a good amount of money, more than I'm making currently for a different company. But that's not the whole thing. It is also the culture that you are in. Because what's the point if you are earning a huge amount of salary, but your working days are like burdened with a lot of work where you barely find a time to even sleep or step out from your desk. So a compensation is not something that just gets credited into your bank account. It is also the whole package, and not the monetary package, but the whole work culture and the things around it. Like if I need to take a leave for a week, it wouldn't be a problem for me. If I need to take a casual day off in the middle of the day, it wouldn't be a problem for me. I'm not burdened by a lot of work. And if I feel like I have a lot of pressure, so like Abhishek is probably aware, like we were discussing this in the last week when we were planning this EMF, that I had to rush to my hometown because my dad fell sick due to COVID. And to do something like that, obviously, right now, most of the companies are sensitive to this, but that might not be the case in normal days when pandemic is not around. So it is important that there needs to be a proper culture around the company where employees are not treated as resources, but are treated as humans. And the whole culture, along with the monetary benefit, ends up becoming a great offer that you need to look for. And just don't look for salary. I have friends who are working in a different company who are making significantly more than a person at GitLab or some other equivalent company would be making. But at the same time, I've seen the schedules that they have, where they would have to work late nights at around 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. at times. Then what's the point of earning all that money if you're not able to spend it, or if you're not able to find time to spend it or enjoy your personal time? So obviously it is important to have a great culture and not just the salary.
Yeah. But Komal, just to make sure that you're motivated enough, I'm sure it's much more than what you would get at any
Oh yes,
not any
obviously.
Indian organization, but at least like obviously the startup culture has
Yeah.
come to India, and people are getting huge salaries right now in Bangalore. So but still, as in I've mentioned a couple of links in the chat. uh, I feel if you're somebody who wants to make sure that you can keep doing this for at least 10 years, you would want to prioritize like making sure that you don't get burnt out just because you want to earn a lot of money. I feel you need to think long term in this perspective. So Adarsh question is a quick one. Like, are there any Android development positions? Just want to quickly.
Nope.
No. So
GitLab doesn't have anything around Android. Like GitLab.com is a responsive website. So one can use it in their phone web browser, which means that we do not need an Android app, at least for now. So,
yeah. So Raj's question, I'm not sure whether we already covered before, but could you just answer that? What are the technologies used in backend and DevOps, and is it Golang and Kubernetes?
So GitLab is a cloud native member, a cloud native foundation member. So CNCF is like a cloud. I don't remember the full form, but it is CNCF, I believe. So obviously it is part of that organization, which means that GitLab natively supports Kubernetes. And yeah, we do a lot of work in Golang. Like I mentioned earlier, like the GitLab CI's backend is all Go because the GitLab runner is written in Go. So that is there. Apart from that, Ruby is like the main language that we use to develop the whole product. But yeah, if you have a Go skill set, that is also acceptable. So, yeah.
Awesome. So next, I would take on Omkar's question, which is like, what has been your most memorable or challenging? That's like you're putting like asking the most memorable, and then suddenly you're asking like what's the challenging. Let's put you on the spot, Kushal.
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, we didn't have functional departments in late 2016, early 2017. We had a single front-end team, single back-end team, single database, etc. But then as more people joined in, and we realized that GitLab is doing an entire DevOps lifecycle, which means that we need to have a functional departments within the company where a single department would have people of all skill sets working on a single DevOps stage, which meant that plant team was part of a plan stage within the DevOps lifecycle. So I became a member of a plant team. It was a newly formed functional department within the company. And the first feature that we were supposed to work as a part of plan initiative was to build roadmaps. So roadmaps are essentially Gantt charts, if you've seen one, where there would be a timelines and the individual epics will be part of that timeline, and you would have a start and due dates which would render that timeline. So we were to build this feature from scratch, and this was the first major feature that I were to work on at GitLab. Before that, I was working on smaller features, and that was the case for pretty much all the team members. This was a major feature, and my goal was to not use any existing libraries, because the initial design that we had in mind from the product managers, from our UX engineers, was a very simple design where we wanted to render an opinionated UI for a roadmap. And I wanted to do it without using any library, using plain Vue.js. And that was the challenging as well as the memorable one. Roadmap is still there. It has developed quite a lot over the years. You can just search for roadmap within GitLab handbook, and it would basically will be presenting you with all the changes. Or you can also go to docs.gitlab.com and you'll be able to see the screenshots, etc. So yeah, so if I were to put out a single feature, then that would be roadmap.
Cool. Next question, we'll take up Varun's, which is, are there any tips or tools from your experience to better manage remote work?
So apart from like workspace related tips, I think our Remote Indians website has a fair amount of all the tools that you should use while working remotely, like your typical workspace setup. But apart from that, like as far as discipline of working remotely is concerned, try not to stress yourself. Have a reminders or an alarm in your phone in place, which reminds you that your working hours are over for a particular day, so that you don't end up stretching yourself out of your working hours. What I personally do is that I would look at my contribution graph within GitLab. So I'll just post a link to my GitLab profile, and you can look at my contribution graph. And if you notice this, you would see that I have two rows entirely blank, which are pointing to Saturday and Sunday. And I have horizontal rows also blank, which represent week offs that I have took. So I look at this graph and I see like whether I'm burning out or not. I see that whether I'm taking frequent vacations or not, or whether I'm working on weekends or not. And it kind of gives me an OCD if I see any of the block out of place within this graph. And I use this as a benchmark personally. So I try not to fill in the dots which are supposed to be empty, which means that I do not work on weekends no matter what, be it releases or not. I have this hard line. I wouldn't be working on weekends, whatever that is. Even if it is a critical thing that has broken in the production, at least I wouldn't be working on it. And the culture at GitLab allows us to do so. You wouldn't imagine someone doing it working in a traditional company. It is expected that you are available on weekends if something goes wrong. Fortunately, the entire workflow that we have at GitLab allows us to live this kind of practices where we don't work on weekends. So I look at this graph. So if you are working in an organization which uses GitHub or GitLab, this is a small tip that I use. You can use this as well. Like you look at your graph and see whether you are working outside your working hours or not. So, yeah.
Cool. So, and just to add to Varun's, question, you can take a look at GitLab's playbook for more ideas around, how to be productive, being while working remotely. So, just a quick reminder, Kushal, we are, kind of finishing up on time, and we have like 10 questions. So maybe we'll try to cover at least half of them in the remaining time. And then I really want to be mindful of everybody's time here. So we'd like to, finish by 6. And guys, again, like, please don't feel disappointed if some of your questions have not been answered. You can always post them on the Slack community, and Kushal will feel free to, like, Kushal will be happy to answer them whenever he gets a chance. Not on the weekend though. Yeah. So Bisso's question I would like take up next, which is what do people generally look for while moving from a junior role to a senior engineer? And maybe talk a little bit about like in the context of being a front-end engineer.
So we have a junior position, intermediate position, and a senior, and then we have staff and distinguished fellow. So these are all the designations for an engineering role. And as you grow in your role, your responsibilities would change. So, for example, I was senior software engineer in my previous company, but when I joined GitLab, I got hired as an intermediate. I was fine with it because I felt that I'm new to the company, so it doesn't really matter what experience I have from previous company. So I joined in as an intermediate, and as I grew towards senior role, I noticed what kind of work that I was doing. I got involved more into architectural work or more fundamental stuff where the things that I would be working on have a larger impact in the product as a whole. And that is true for any engineering position across GitLab. Like as you grow more into the role, you would be making more lasting decisions. You wouldn't be doing trivial changes. You wouldn't be doing smaller changes. Obviously, if you want to, you can, but it is expected out of you that you participate in a larger conversations where the changes that you are doing is impacting a lot more people and impacting a larger product area as a whole.
Cool. Bisso, I hope that answers your question. And I think the next question is a little bit nerdy, so I would maybe like take the liberty of not answering that bit, but maybe
so Abhishek, I would suggest that you can basically create a thread within our general channel within Remote Indian, and just let people post their questions there, and I would reply all the questions. Like I wouldn't mind, no matter how trivial or technical the question is, I'll reply there for sure. Yeah. So if your question isn't taken, be sure to post it into the thread that Abhishek starts, and I'll respond there. So,
cool. Omkar's question, I want to take that bit. Can you talk about instances of teamwork playing a strong role, and how do you ensure that team values remain aligned throughout the project life cycles?
Yeah, so I would like to bring up an incident that we had in early 2017. So if you have been following GitLab as a company, then you might recall or remember that back in February of 2017, we had a production incident where what happened was our database got wiped out, our primary database got wiped out, by our database engineer, who was a senior database engineer. And it meant that, so what was happening was that we were getting a lot of spams. And in order to prevent spamming, we wanted to basically pause the user accounts which were spamming. And if, that meant that all the spam comments that were posted required to be deleted. And instead of the replication server, where we wanted to first try out the SQL command to delete it, our database engineer ended up executing that command into our production server. And that basically caused a lot of information just wiped out. And we lost total of like 6 to 7 hours of activity in that incident. But GitLab remained down for pretty much half the day. So it was a fairly public incident. It made it into Hacker News top 10. And then, so what we did here was that, so typically you would expect that the person would get fired, right? But that didn't happen. The database engineer who did it by mistake, and he's a brilliant engineer within GitLab, and he is still the part of GitLab. And back then, what we did was that we started live streaming the entire recovery process.
Wow.
We started tweeting out to all our community members, like, this is what is taking time. This is why GitLab.com is down right now. And we basically did a YouTube live stream of how we were recovering it. People basically came there and suggested their possible solutions on how to recover it. Obviously, it was all technical discussion there, but entire company collaborated on working towards a solution to that incident. And that was a huge example of entire company living its value together without having to basically blaming each other or not doing anything. So I think that was a good example of working towards something in common. And apart from that, like on day-to-day basis, even if you are working on a different functional department, it doesn't really matter. You are free to contribute to a different department's work. You are free to review to a different department's work, give out your suggestions. So collaborations happen more frequently than you would assume. We do not have functional silos. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, people do remember that incident, it seems. Like, yeah. So let's, like end it on a like, like a really tough question, and maybe Pranav's question does that pretty well. What do you not like about GitLab? Is there something which they can do better as a company?
I wouldn't say that it is something that is specific to GitLab. I think it is specific to remote job itself. Like I miss being in touch in person with my colleagues, which is not happening right now. And we used to have the annual summits, and
Yeah.
that kind of allowed us to meet our team members in person. But we haven't been able to do it at least for past 1.5 years because of the pandemic. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to do it later this year if things go according to the plan. But for now, I think, and that's true for all remote positions as well, like you would feel being out of touch to rest of the company, and the only way to see your company is through Slack or team calls. And I think those are the two windows that give you a glimpse of what rest of the company is. So I think that is a con with any remote full-time remote job. So,
Yeah. Cool. I think we'll end on that a little bit of, like I wouldn't say pessimistic, but it's like the reality of things. Like, like while there are a lot of advantages of working remotely, there's also this other side where we do need human connection. And the pandemic, which is like, like really traumatic, I feel not having that essentially compounds whatever we're going through right now. So I hope, like I've copied all of the questions that have, like been unanswered. I'll post them on a separate thread on the tribe channel, and Kushal will, try to answer them as soon as possible. And I hope this was a very insightful session, and like it was very interesting for me to, be hosting this. Thank you, Kushal, for taking out the time and doing this for the community.
yep,
So,
yep.
so
Thank you, Abhishek.
And yeah, have a great rest of the evening then. yeah, I'll see you around on Slack.
Yep, sure. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.